In today's video, I'm going to share with you my journey as an artist, how I got started in art, and how it's evolved into a full-time art business. To start with, my name's Rondell. If you haven't been here before, welcome. I am 45 years old. I'm a single mum to 3 daughters who are 19, 17 and 15. I live on the beautiful Mornington Peninsula in Victoria, which is about an hour and a half south of Melbourne in Australia. And I started my business, Rondell Designs, just over 8 years ago now, and decided at the beginning of 2020 to take it full time, which in hindsight was literally the worst time in history to decide to go full time. However, it's been a really interesting journey, and I'm so excited to share that journey with you in this video. So back at the beginning, I've always loved art. As a child, I was always drawing and trying to learn and grow my skills as an artist. I was always told, obviously, that art wasn't a career that would be able to make money from. So I never really took it seriously as a business opportunity. And when I was a teenager, I did for a few years there really let my art go and really forgot about it. Was probably in a bit of a dark place between sort of 14 and 17. And really just didn't care about art, except for I still was doing it in school, and it was still my favorite subject in school. And I remember during my art classes, it was literally the highlight of my week, because I always have felt amazing when creating art. When people talk about when they get into that flow state, like meditation, art for me is definitely that. And it's a real shame that I did sort of stop drawing in my spare time as a teenager, because I feel like it would have helped me through a lot more easily than I did get through those years. In my 20s, again, I completely lost touch with my art. I got married quite young at 22, moved interstate with my husband at the time. He was in the Air Force, so he got posted into state, and so away from all family and friends. And then I had my 3 daughters up there in Queensland. Eventually, I did make a couple of friends, but when I had my first baby at 25, I actually rediscovered my love of art through scrapbooking, believe it or not. So my mum came up to visit and bought these magazines with her that were all scrapbooking pages, and I loved it. As well as art, I've always loved craft. So I bought some scrapbooking supplies, got started doing it as a way to record my daughter's baby years and milestones and all that sort of stuff, and loved that creativity. So I rediscovered my creative self through scrapbooking. And then I also started, it was just at the start of sort of online shopping. I remember eBay had just launched. There was a very small amount of e-commerce stores. So I actually started buying supplies for scrapbooking wholesale and then selling it on eBay. And the first few months were incredible. I was selling and growing every month. I got to the point where I was making nearly $1,000 a month through my eBay store just on the side, as well as I was still working at a bank at that time. I decided that I wanted to have a website because I saw a couple of other scrapbooking and craft stores that had opened a website. I loved that idea. Of course, back in that time, I think by this time it was about 2005, it was really expensive to get a website built if you didn't know how to do it yourself. So I think I spent about $3,500 Australian to get this really beautiful website built. I bought lots of products. I got into debt with products because I was really tired. Like, I'd had my second baby in 2005. It was a really tiring time for me, and I wasn't getting my products uploaded as much as I should be. I also set up a forum attached to my website, so I built a really amazing community of crafters. Then in 2007, I had my 3rd child, and I was just finding it really hard to sort of run everything, but I kept going. And I was making okay money, but I just probably kept buying too much products and didn't get it uploaded onto the website, and was so tired from having 3 small kids. It was becoming a lot. So then I ended up stopping selling product and just changed the website just so it was forum, and I was selling advertising on it. So like banner ads, remember those old banner ads? I was selling those to other scrapbooking stores and made my website a directory. So people who were looking for online scrapbooking stores would come to my website and find them that way. And they were also coming into my community forum. That was amazing. 2 years after my last daughter was born, I ended up, my marriage ended. So it was a very tumultuous time, as you can imagine. I had really rediscovered the art side of my creativity by that point, though. About 6 months before my marriage got separated, I was at a friend's house. I remember it very clearly. It was a scrapbooking night. It was where you just go and get together as a group and do craft for a few hours. And I had bought a little set of watercolor paints and a fine liner and some watercolor paper. And for the first time, instead of just creating and crafting and painting like little bits and pieces that you put on your scrapbooking page, I decided to do a drawing. And I drew a deer based on a little picture I had in a magazine. And I remember just being like a light bulb moment going, oh my gosh, that's right. I love to draw and just make art and not necessarily crafting it and making it into like scrapbooking or whatever. I just love to draw. So from that night, I started drawing a lot more, and I got my sketchbook and I was creating and then I started to make some paintings. And that's when that bug of art really got back into my brain. So I started making little paintings, and they were kind of a bit scrapbooking, like I would use pattern papers, but also paint and drawing, and had a little market store with my friend who was making handmade clothes. And that was really great. I loved that so much and was really enjoying the process of growing as an artist. And I started doing some commissions for people. But then my ex-husband got posted interstate. So he's in the Air Force. So he got told he had to move to New South Wales. I had to make the very difficult decision. Do I stay in Queensland? Do I follow him to where he was getting posted so the kids could still be close to him? Or do I come back home to Melbourne where all of both mine and his extended family were, so the kids could then spend more time with grandparents and things? And I made the decision to come back to Melbourne. I felt it was best for them to be around family and best for me as well. And then so I couldn't do the markets with my friend anymore, and I had to make a really big decision. Like, I didn't want to go back into banking. I hated that industry so much at that time. And I thought, okay, let's go to art school. I always wanted to go to art school. I love the idea of it, but got talked out very quickly. Like, you won't make money out of art. There's no point in going to art school or uni. So I found a TAFE course, which was a diploma course in visual arts, specializing in illustration, because I thought, how great, I could become an illustrator and get paid to create illustrations. My favorite magazine was Frankie magazine in Australia. I loved the idea of getting featured in that magazine. So I did that course part-time over 3 years. Obviously, my girls were still very young and I just couldn't manage doing full-time. And I loved it. It was amazing. It was the best experience. I learned so much. And then when I got out, I decided to start doing freelance illustration and realized very quickly, like within a matter of months, I hated it. I hated working for brands to their brief. My creative juices literally exited my brain after I had to go by what other people wanted. I just wanted to create art on my terms. So instead, I decided to start trying to do market stalls again. This time, I thought I'd focus on making paintings and then putting positive affirmations over them, which I loved, but I didn't sell many of them. So if I had stuck to it, honestly, I probably would have found my market, to be honest. But I gave up on that real quickly. And one of the mums from my kids' primary school bought a fabric printer and she was making cushions. So I thought, oh, I could make cushions out of my art. So maybe people would buy it because it's more of a functional product. I got the fabric printed. I'd given her files that were way too small, so they came out really small. I had just recently bought a handmade wheat bag at a market, so a heat pack, and thought, oh, I could make them with these beautiful little images. So I started making some wheat bags, sewed them all up on my sewing machine, took them to a market. They sold really well. They sold way better than my greeting cards and my prints were selling. So I kind of focused on those. And honestly, they became my biggest seller for many years. I've only just stopped selling them last year, at the end of last year, because I actually had just gotten sick of sitting at the sewing machine. It was not about the art. My business, Rondell Designs, became less about the art and more about the wheat bags. I was known as the wheat bag lady. Now, up until 2020, so between 2015 and 2020, I was running my business, but I was doing it part-time. I was still being supported by the government a little bit because I was a sole parent, and I had part-time jobs. So for a while, I worked in a canteen at my girls' school. I then worked at my friend's cafe. I did a little bit of commercial cleaning. But at the start of 2020, I was like, right, I'm taking my business full-time. I was still doing the wheat bags at that time, but I was already refocusing on my art, and I decided I mapped out all of 2020 to do all these amazing markets. I was doing wholesale trade shows. I was going to do all of these big markets that I managed to get into that were really hard to get into. And I was ready to take things to the next level and generate a full-time income for myself. Well, we know how 2020 went. I also opened a co-working space at the beginning of 2020 because I wanted to get my studio off my dining table and into its own dedicated space. And the idea of getting a co-working space was I rent the factory, sublease out smaller areas, and then that basically will pay for the rent and give me a space for free to work from. Now, again, that was not a good idea to do that at that time, but we got through it. Now in 2023, the co-working space is doing really well. I've brought on a partner, which is my accountant, and she's amazing. But yeah, I was still making the wheat bags, and although they were doing quite well, I wasn't getting a lot of profit from them. I explored the idea of outsourcing them overseas, but it went against my sustainability model in my business, and it was I just wanted to stop them. I wanted to stop being known as the wheat bag lady. I wanted to be seen as an artist, and I wanted to really focus on the art. So at the end of last year, I stopped making the wheat bags altogether, which was a really scary move because that was my main income source. But now instead, I had started doing kids and adults art classes at my studio last year. After all the COVID stuff settled down, I was starting to make a good income through my workshop. So now, thankfully, the income I was making from my wheat bags has now been replaced by the workshops that I run each week, and I get a lot more enjoyment out of running these workshops for both adults and children. Even still though, that is still my bread and butter income, and I would love to just be making my own art full time. But as an artist, you do have to sort of go with the flow and keep the money coming in while you're growing, and find as much time as you can to do the stuff that you're really passionate about. Another thing that I've explored since the beginning of last year is NFT art, so digital art that's attached to a contract on the blockchain through cryptocurrency. I am obsessed with that, and I've started selling a little bit. It's very, very new space in art, and it will grow over the years. I'm actually going overseas to the US twice this year for conferences. In April, my artwork is being exhibited in New York City as part of NFT NYC. So it's super exciting. But I'm really focusing this year on growing my YouTube channel. I love creating videos for you guys, both educational as far as creative business tips, as well as just art and my process of making art. So I'm loving that. I'm loving exploring my own style, especially with digital art now that I use Procreate quite a bit to make digital art that I then sell as the NFTs. And I just love making art. I love running my workshops with my kids and adults. And I'm just sort of spending so much more time creating art that I love these days. I do want to spend more time making some physical paintings. I love mixed media, and I think that's my main style that I will stick to. Like watercolor. This watercolor I'm creating as an example for an upcoming paint and sip workshop where the group want to do watercolor native flower bunches. So this is a really basic painting that I'm doing here today. I would normally spend a lot more time going into a lot more detail, but I do find people who are new beginners get quite overwhelmed if you make the example too detailed. So I'm learning so much, and I've loved my journey as an artist. If you want to become a full-time artist, I would say take it slow, don't jump in straight away, but also don't settle for the money-making thing if that's not the area you really want to focus on. Honestly, looking back 8 years ago when I first started this business, if I had have stuck with the paintings, even with the inspirational quotes on them, rather than going for physical products where I was then sitting at a sewing machine most days, I honestly feel like my style would have evolved a lot quicker than it has, and I would have been a much more successful selling artist by this stage. But I am where I am, and I'm really happy where I am. I've loved all the things that I've experienced. I've loved everything I've learned. This year, my focus again is growing my YouTube channel because I love teaching people, but I want to do it digitally to much more masses. And I'm re-entering some art shows now that they're opened back up for my physical paintings because I do want to make room for more physical art, and I've set up a couple of little retail spaces within 2 indoor markets that are local where I don't have to man the stall, they man it for me and I just sell. And so I'm excited to see what happens in 2023. I hope you enjoyed this video. I did babble on quite a little bit, so hopefully I didn't bore you too much. Please let me know if you have any questions at all or comments. Comment below. I'd love to hear from you, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy my channel.